Origin Chess, CG Reaction. This is World War Zero, the Crimean War. Extra History by the channel Extra History. They changed the name, right? It was Extra Credits before. I'm pretty sure they started this channel as a gaming channel, right? I mean, their animation was always the same as it was the first, but yeah. I love this channel. I've done quite a few videos from them. I mean, you know, it can be really fun and dramatic, but yeah, yeah. So this is, I mean, World War Zero, the crime. There are many World War Zeros in that way. I mean, we can say that this is just a, I don't know, chapter in it. There's somebody in the comments says that isn't the 7-year war supposed to be World War Zero? But yeah, it's also like there are many things that transpired to World War One. I mean, people have just this misconception that somebody punched somebody and that's just escalated. No, that's not how it works. Usually, war is mostly as a political tool. People don't just, it's not like a bar fight, like bar brawl. That's not how it works. Even though it feels like it, that's not how it works. People usually use war as a tool in their political arsenal. So, a lot of things transpired like this, Crimean War, 7 years war, and a lot of things, happened before it became a world war. Because war was always a thing, but it never basically came together as one because it never became global, right? Some war came close to being global, but never did. And then all these chapters somehow just was enough that at the start of 20th century, everything just exploded. And because of that, there was another World War II as well. We are so happy that there was no World War III. And this is why, people say like nukes were a mistake. But I think they are the one who stopped World War III because there were always wars. And then it just escalated to world wars. Then, of course, end of it, nobody's going to be satisfied. So that was World War II. So this was always going to happen, World War III, World War IV, World War V, because history tells us there are always wars. And once it became world level, that's it. But I think nukes are the only thing that stopped it. But yeah, that's always fun. Remember, if you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe so I know which type of videos to react to more. I love history. As you know, I've done a lot of historical reactions, basically. And yeah, there are channels I know that are really good. But, if you know any other channel that I haven't seen, I guess, comment down. And yeah, let's watch this one.
Jerusalem, Good Friday, 1846. Pilgrims and priests thronged the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, eager to pray at the site of Christ's crucifixion. Now, most of the time, Holy Week falls separately on the Catholic and Orthodox religious calendars, but this year they coincide and everyone's here at once. It's packed.
Isn't the Good Friday just the Friday before Easter? And Easter is the same thing, so why does the week change?
And they're shouting. The Orthodox priests arrived first, putting their altar cloth on the altar. Then the Catholics, furious, try to yank it off and replace it with their own. Both insist they have a document from the Ottoman Sultan supporting their right, and suddenly a monk throws a punch. Within seconds, the seething crowd are shoving and kicking, smashing each other with crucifixes and candlesticks. Turkish bodyguards hired by wealthy pilgrims lay in with clubs. A priest swings an incense burner like a morning star, and people start drawing pistols. By the time Ottoman troops regain control, 40 people are dead. Welcome to the start of the First Modern War.
Which is a religious one, of course it is.
Don't forget, as soon as you're done watching this episode, episode 2 is already up a week early and ad-free over on Nebula. Stick around till the end for a teaser. The Crimean War is perhaps the most poorly named conflict in history. From its name, you might think that it was fought to settle a dispute over the Crimean Peninsula. It wasn't. Or you might assume that Crimea was the most important front of the war, but you'd be wrong again. Clashes also occurred along the Danube in what's now Romania, in the Baltic Sea, and even in the far North Pacific. And though the land operations in Crimea are the most famous, it was the naval operations that actually won the war. In fact, historians have even proposed, mostly hypothetically mind you, that it be renamed the Baltic War, or the Great Russian War, or even World War Zero. See, the Crimean War was fought all across Europe, with Russia.
Yeah, before the air superiority, naval wars were the wars, right, in a way, because you need to really think about, like, when you span through oceans, right, you go to different time zones and the scale gets bigger. Oceans are the only thing that's kind of like common, so naval wars are kind of the thing before anything can become a ground war. Nowadays, usually it's air war, right? Naval is still a big part, but air has replaced that element of it. Like, it was just superior way of doing things.
facing off against an allied coalition including the UK, France, and the Ottoman Empire. But it was also the first truly modern war, a conflict that began looking like the Napoleonic past, but by its end presaged the industrial slaughter of World War I. It would be the first steam-powered war, the first telegraph war, the first war with photographs and war correspondence, and it would kill at least 500,000 people. And supposedly, it all started over who got to hold a pair of keys. Now, deadly brawls at holy sites, like the one in this episode's opening, were not unusual in Ottoman-controlled Palestine. For centuries, pilgrimage sites had flip-flopped between the Catholic and Orthodox churches based on whichever faction obtained a decree from the Sultan. But in 1757, the Ottomans finally had enough and decreed a status quo, in which all 6 Christian churches would receive access to the religious sites and shared responsibility for their upkeep. And to give you an idea of how seriously this is taken, get this. When the status quo was declared, it stated that nothing in a site could be changed without the churches all agreeing to it. And as you can imagine, getting full agreement proved nearly impossible. Hence, things like this happened. The day before the decree, a workman left his ladder at one of the churches, and it's been there ever since, to this day.
I mean, the ladder is still somehow surviving. That's surprising thing, right? Like, I don't know. How did... Why didn't it, just crumple down by this point? Like, that's some well-made ladder. Holy shit. I guess nobody's touching it to begin with for anything. Might be the reason why it's surviving. I don't know. But yeah, see, every time people see a scene like this, I've seen this come up in many videos. People look at how idiots we humans are. We can't even agree on something like this, or something like common sense like this. We can't even do. Like, how stupid are we? And sometimes self-deprecation goes out of hand. This is a real psychological thing. I don't know, people like, I've seen in lots of video comments like, humans are scars. We need another dinosaur asteroid, this and that. And everybody just, like the comment and just laugh. There is a limit to self-deprecation. Beyond that, it just turn into nihilistic darkness, right? Which is not good, right? It changes how you think. It changes how you act, right? And it will influence a lot of decisions, a lot of things that you would care about, otherwise you won't care about, because that's how your mind becomes. Even you don't realize it. So that's another topic. But the thing is, people always laugh about things like that. Look at how stupid we humans are. But there is a deep reason behind it, right? Somebody would just, say that, okay, we're not going to make any changes to buildings, colors, and things like that, but who cares about a ladder? It's common sense. You should just remove it. But no, it's not. Like, think about religious artifacts. Right, like this in the start of this, they were trying to yank their cloth or whatever, right? Christian cloth, and that started a brawl. So in Christianity, a lot of things are like symbolic. So if you can remove a ladder, you can remove a cloth, you can remove something else, you can remove a small cross here and there. Like, it can just escalate, and it sets a precedent. Like, after status quo, you can't remove anything, not even a small thing. That was the point. So if you remove the ladder, it just says, if you can remove a ladder, I can remove a fucking cloth. What's the problem? It sets a precedent. So it might look stupid, and at a hindsight, not a hindsight, from outside perspective, it could look like, oh, look at how we stupid humans are. But no, if you don't know the detail, it will seem like that. But that's just your lack of knowledge, right? I mean, there is more detail about this. Humans are conniving. Humans are smart. And if you don't, make everything like equal, right? They can exploit anything. So something doesn't get exploited. You can't even remove the ladder. That's the point.
Things became even more complicated when Catholic France, who mostly had custody of these sites via treaties, turned away from religion during the Revolutionary period, and Eastern Orthodox Christians stepped in to fill the power vacuum. Then, when the French returned to Palestine in the 1830s, a series of confrontations over the sites followed. Groups warred over who would get to fix structures, since maintenance legally implied ownership. Things got tense. In 1842, the Orthodox Church erected a wall in the Church of the Nativity, blocking Catholic access to the shrine of Jesus' birthplace. 5 years later, they pried up a silver star that French Catholics had put there. But the nastiest conflict was over keys. By tradition, the Orthodox monks kept the keys to the church's front door, with the Catholics possessing a less prestigious key to an interior door. Angry at this slight, the two groups started a brawl in 1852 that killed several Orthodox monks. So in response to these worsening brawls, 2 men intervened in the conflict. Nicholas I, Tsar of Russia, and Napoleon III, recently crowned Emperor of France. But let's start with Nicholas I, who was largely responsible for starting the war. By 1852, Nicholas had been on the throne for 26 years and held sway over the fastest-growing empire in Europe. A military man, he grew up fascinated by his father's generals, dressed in impeccable uniforms, and slept on a cot. But perhaps Nicholas's most prominent feature was his near-religious belief in restoring the Russian Empire to its former glory.
People see things like, oh, slept on a cot, so that must be like, okay, he's like disciplined, he's like militaristic, but there's a psychological element behind it. Like, it's one thing for soldiers to sleep in that. If you're an emperor, czar, whatever, you still do that. Yeah, that tells a certain psychological element of you, like how you think and how strong-minded you are. That's not necessarily a good thing. So you can see where his mentality and strong-mindedness is going to go, right? So, sparking wars, having strong ideologies is not a so far-fetched thing, for him at least.
See, Nicholas believed that as the last Orthodox power, Russia was the heir of Byzantium and Rome. And as head of the Russian Orthodox Church, he considered himself the protector of Orthodox Christians worldwide, including in Ottoman territory, where they did indeed experience state-sponsored oppression and at times were massacred. He regularly backed Christian uprisings in Ottoman territory, such as the Greek War of Independence in 1821. This belief went hand in hand with Russia's expansionist policies, which had spent nearly a century taking bites out of Ottoman territory. Though often done with the stated goal of protecting Orthodox Christians, these were also about expansion south. Catherine the Great herself started this pattern by capturing the Crimean Peninsula and its warm water port of Sevastopol. That port gave Russia a path to the Mediterranean, provided they passed through Ottoman territory. These lands were not only important for reaching ports, though. Nicholas also feared the increasing liberalism of the West, which he felt would undermine Russia's autocratic policies, and he wanted a strong Russia with buffer zones to keep the West at bay. Yeah, and if this is all sounding a bit familiar, a lot of historians have pointed out the parallels to recent events. In fact, Crimea itself, while internationally recognized as part of Ukraine.
People have made that point, like lots of things that Russia did and Russia hold as ideologies kind of also can apply today, which is a scary thing, which means Russia was always going to do this, what's happening. If it can trace back like that, their mind was always like this.
Has been occupied by Russia since 2014. Actually, though, now that we're on the subject, as a quick aside, it did feel wrong to do this series without at least mentioning the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine in today's day and age. One of the saddest aspects of which has been its impact on civilians. And to that end, myself and several of our team have made donations to Doctors Without Borders, who are providing treatment to civilians within Ukraine being affected by the war, ranging from emergency medicine to psychotherapy to medical evacuation. They're also working with communities of displaced Ukrainians currently residing in neighboring countries as well. So if you'd like to chip in and you are able, we'll put a link in the description to where you can help them out with all of that. Sorry for interrupting the history. It just felt important and like it had to be done. But I digress. Russian expansion during the 18th and 19th centuries vastly weakened the Ottoman state. And to Nicholas, there was only one way it would end. During a meeting with British officials in 1844, he referred to the Ottoman Empire as a sick man, a man dying. And when that man died, he said, the powers would have to figure out what action to take. This became known as the Eastern Question. What should Europe do about the seemingly crumbling Ottomans? Nicholas wanted to partition the Ottoman Empire, or,
what should Europe do? Yeah, just give the British and French pen and tell them to draw a border. Everything's going to be fine.
To have Russia take it over entirely. And he saw Britain as a potential ally in this, believing that the British would be happy to see the Ottomans fall, and that after any partition, they would naturally back Russia's claim over the holy sites. I mean, the UK wouldn't side with France, right? Especially not while it's governed by Napoleon Bonaparte's nephew. Though in this line of thinking, he was vastly mistaken. Turned out, Britain increasingly saw Russia as the danger, not France. Also at the time, Russia and Britain were engaged in sort of a Cold War, known as the Great Game, each trying to influence governments in Central Asia. The British government also harbored fears that Russia...
Yeah, their fear was kind of true, let's be honest. They came very close, right? There were certain wars that happened too. Skirmishes between Russia and Great Britain, I guess. So it wasn't that far-fetched. But let's be honest, the main thing is the Nicholas looked really strong. In his will, let's just say, and that always going to panic Britain. Like, I'd rather be friend with France than risk anything with Tsar. And then they probably saw him sleeping in a cot. They're like, oh yeah, I'm not touching this. He'll probably go all the way, trying to take everything. So it kind of makes sense.
Planned to move on India, and worried that if the Ottoman Empire collapsed, Russia's dominance of the East would upset the post-war Napoleonic balance of powers. In other words, the British were committed to keeping Turkey around as a check against Russia, and even supported that by pushing the Ottomans into a reform program meant to strengthen the state. But Britain's biggest worry were Russian naval bases in Crimea. Using them, Russia could launch a strike against Istanbul before France or Britain could dispatch a fleet to defend it, effectively collapsing the Ottoman state at will. By contrast, on the other side of this religious issue was Napoleon III, who'd been elected the first president of France in 1848. However, then in 1852 he'd lost the election, and instead of conceding, just declared himself emperor. However, his coup was on shaky ground and depended heavily on the support of traditional Catholics. So, in an attempt to mollify this political bloc and bring France back to its international standing, he dispatched a famously confrontational diplomat to the Ottoman court in order to insist that a 1740 treaty granted France the right to govern holy sites. Then, when the Ottomans agreed with France, an equally inflammatory Russian ambassador countered with a claim based on treaties they claimed nullified that 1740 treaty. So now the Ottomans, fearing Russia might actually declare war, switched their position and granted them the holy sites. Not ready to back down and to prove a point.
Yeah, that's what happened when you capture the most famous place in the world and then get too weaker to basically defend it or keep it. That's basically Ottoman for you. If Ottoman Empire was any other place, they might have a chance. But no, they had to get the center of the religious war, right? Let's take the most holy Catholic site in the world and worry about everything else later. Well, there you go. Orthodox and Catholic and Ottomans are going to get crushed in between.
France then dispatched the 80-gun warship Charlemagne to sail into the Black Sea, a clear violation of treaties that stated warships could not do this in peacetime. Unable to resist this act of gunboat diplomacy, the Ottomans then switched their position again, renaming France the protector of the holy sites, to which Russia responded with invasion. In July 1853, Russian troops surged across the Danube, occupying the territories of Wallachia and Moldavia, which were jointly governed by Russia and the Ottomans. And at this point, Nicholas considered the war as good as over, certain that Britain and France would not support the Turks against fellow Europeans. He was wrong again. On October 16th, the Ottomans, with the support of Britain and France, declared war on Russia. World War II had begun, and we'll get into all those details next week. Wait, narrative Matt, what do you mean next week? I'm watching Ep 2 right now, so... Oh good! Casual Matt's back. Wait, how are you already watching the next episode? Over on Nebula and with my eyes. Here, check this out, it's pretty...
There we go to original video page link, and from there support this channel. Go to nebula.tv, go.nebula.tv for process extra credits, because they were called extra credits at the time, apparently. Well, they're still called extra credits, I guess. This is just a month ago. But they just changed the name of the channel. Okay. Seriously, Nicholas's faith in Britain and France, where they hate Ottomans so much. No way they go oppose me. No, you are the new enemy, right? Ottomans are no longer the threat. Now you're the threat. So that is really surprising. Like, throughout the history, I've seen one thing, at least when it comes to Britain and France, and that when it comes to politics, very few people have grasp of how anything like Britain and France work, because they get everything wrong all the time. And British is like, what are you talking about? Of course I'm not going to back you. You do realize you're the biggest threat, right? Yeah, so that is something. So yeah, this is one of the World War Zeros. But yeah, it's a fun series all around. I don't think I've done a Crimean War detailed video at least. Yeah, so this is going to be first one. So it is interesting. Right, well, if you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe. That way I'll know what type of videos to do, more. I did a poll recently, and history kind of win. History and all the videos are kind of like tied in 40%. So history is like the one thing people want to watch more, I guess. I don't know. So I'm going to do a lot of historical videos. This philosophical too, I guess, based on history or something, like crowd type of videos too. But yeah, so definitely check them out. If you want to subscribe. That way you'll know when I upload. And yeah, I'll see you next time.